Welcome to the Week 6 Waiver Wire Show. Today, we'll be discussing the top waiver wire pickups at each position, including bid recommendations and deeper league targets. Be sure to stay tuned to the end where we answer listener questions sent in to us via Twitter. Start with some of these running back injury situations. Khalil Herbert is going to miss a bunch of time. Sounds like a high ankle sprain for Khalil Herbert. Bears also lost Travis Homer to an injury and Roshan Johnston to concussion in that Thursday night game in Week 5. Interestingly, I think they do have D'Onta Foreman, who has been a healthy scratch ever since Week 1. I always thought D'Onta Foreman could play. I was surprised that they completely iced him out, but we are projecting going forward Roshan Johnston as the 1, D'Onta Foreman as the 2. Mark, how aggressive would you be for Roshan on the wire, and what do you think about Bears split in their backfield while Herbert is out?
I'd be pretty aggressive on Roshan this week. I think he's clearly the top ad of the week, just given, you mentioned Khalil Herbert, high ankle sprain. We've seen running backs miss several weeks due to that. No word on if he'll be placed on IR or not, which would be minimum 4 games out. But even with the high ankle sprains, efficiency is typically slow to come back for those running backs. And Roshan is, a rookie running back that we've been excited about in general. So I think this is a great time to add him. I'd be pretty aggressive on him this week. And then, he did leave the last game with a concussion, but that was on Thursday Night Football. And so luckily he gets, about 9-10 days to recover before Sunday. And so we could see him potentially, return in Week 6. I think that's a little up in the air. And then when you look at D'Onta Foreman, I think he is kind of definitely an interesting stash this week because there's a chance he could be the Week 6 starter. I definitely think they'll activate him and he's likely, to probably get 40 to 50% of the early down carries. I think we can be confident like Roshan's going to get almost all of the passing down work, but Foreman for super cheap, I think is, kind of an interesting sneaky pickup here. Yeah. If you don't have enough FAAB to get Roshan or something like that.
I think that there's, in a worst case scenario for Roshan Johnston, they install D'Onta Foreman into the Khalil Herbert role and leave Roshan in his role. That's the worst case for Roshan. I don't think that's the likeliest, but that's the worst case. The more likely scenario, I think, is that Foreman takes a big piece of that Khalil Herbert role. Roshan gets some of it and sticks with the role that he already had, which is pretty strong, but I do think that Roshan might go for like way more than Foreman. I mean, in some leagues, you could see, I don't know, 10x of FAAB bids on Roshan versus Foreman, and I'd be wanting to try to add Foreman for cheap here, especially if I needed someone in the short term. Always a chance Roshan does not get cleared. Speaking of running back injuries, let's go to the Miami situation. Sadly, one of the stars of the fantasy football season, Devon Achane, I know a guy that Mark was on big time before the season, unfortunately, looks like he's going to go on IR or at least miss multiple weeks with a knee injury. At the same time, Jeff Wilson is coming back. And so as you see here, we have Jeff Wilson. For those of you watching on YouTube, you see here, I'm not servicing the audio listeners well, but audio listeners, you would see Jeff Wilson here in tier 2 of the ads. Mark, what do you think about Miami backfield? How aggressive on Jeff Wilson?
Definitely sad to see Achane go down. In terms of Wilson, I do think he can hit the ground running reasonably, looking at this situation. I think there was a chance he was held on IR another week just because Achane and Mostert were playing so well and they kind of had a cupcake matchup against the Giants. So I think he might have a decent workload here. I would expect him to be the RB2 behind Mostert early on. And, we've seen just in this backfield, Mike McDaniel hesitant to load up Mostert with carries and usage. So I do think Wilson, if he returns this week, is likely to get 30 to 40% of the snaps and the touches, and they have an awesome matchup against Carolina. So, a little uncertainty around Achane's injury and how long he'll be out, but Wilson would probably be number 2 on the list at running back ad behind Roshan this week.
Yeah. Wilson's been out for a long time, man. He missed the end of training camp and then he ended up on IR. And yeah, he's supposed to practice this week. We will see on him. I don't want people to forget Chris Brooks or Salvon Ahmed, just in case Jeff Wilson isn't ready. Raheem Mostert also has not been the picture of health throughout his career. So yeah, I do think though that like, if you're comparing Roshan and Jeff Wilson, I would probably bid, I don't know, 3 times as much on Roshan as I would on Jeff Wilson. I just think Roshan's way more valuable right now, although it's scary to say anything bad at all about Miami players because my close personal friend and twin, Mike McDaniel, is such a boss. Let's keep it moving on the running back injuries. We'll go to Arizona. James Conner won't be able to shove it down my throat anymore because he is on IR with a knee injury of his own. Now, is Amari DeMarado wasn't even a starter, I believe, at TCU, was very good in the preseason. I think he's going to play pretty far ahead of Keontae Ingram. And maybe that's a hot take. Keontae Ingram's been so bad. I know Sam noted this in his article. He's had a neck injury. He's been so bad. They also have Corey Clement on the roster, who I think has at least a chance to play. But DeMarcado, to me, has the pass down work. And if he can get, 50% of that James Conner base work, that's pretty exciting for DeMarcado, especially when you consider the way that Josh Dobbs has been playing. So I'd probably be more aggressive on DeMarcado than Jeff Wilson right now, I think. What do you think about that one, Mark? Anything else on Arizona?
Yeah, I'm a little torn there on him versus Wilson. Just, let's talk about the Cardinals here first. DeMarcado kind of came on our radar the last couple of weeks because he was starting to steal pass down snaps from James Conner. So I think that role for sure will be his moving forward. Keontae Ingram has missed the last couple of weeks, so a little bit hard to know where these two will fall in the pecking order. I do think like DeMarcado, he's undrafted free agent, didn't go to the combine. There's not really a whole lot to go off of here when looking at DeMarcado's profile. So just the unknown there makes me a bit more excited. He did run, I guess, 4.44 at either a pro day or somewhere along the way. He was clocked at 4.44. And we know he has the pass down work. And looking at Arizona's schedule, they play the Rams, Seattle, Baltimore, Cleveland, Atlanta, the next 5 games, which are all bottom half of the league matchups at this point in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs. So, the Cardinals are likely to be trailing, leading them into more pass down situations. So I do think DeMarcado is definitely the add over Ingram in this backfield. In terms of comparing him to Wilson, like I don't know, like I'm not really expecting a whole lot here from DeMarcado. I do think he's a decent add this week, but just looking at this offense, I don't really know what the upside is here. Like you're probably pumped with like 8, 9, 10 points from him in a given week.
Well, that's what I would have thought for James Conner also, but then James Conner every week is shoving 20 balls down my throat, right? And that's not to say that DeMarcado is as good as James Conner, but I don't want to be too harsh on this about offensive environment because they've played well, and they played San Francisco, and they played Dallas, and they still played well, have the Arizona Cardinals. So, yeah, I think I'd have DeMarcado and Wilson. I'd probably have DeMarcado like a hair above Wilson, like 1 or 2% of my FAAB higher on DeMarcado rather than Wilson. Other big injury this week with waiver implications was Justin Jefferson, unfortunately, going down with a hamstring injury. Talked to Silva about this, and I think, a lot of us are on the same page. This is really scary because the Vikings could be 1-7, 1-8, 1-9, 2-7 by the time Justin Jefferson's ready to come back. And at that point, is it Kirk Cousins even on the team, or have they traded him to the Jets or traded him to the Falcons or something like that? So it's scary. Now, KJ Osborne is someone who has been out there a lot for the Vikings, but has not really been a fantasy consideration, frankly, because he's not that good at football, in my opinion. However, they are going to try to slide him into that Justin Jefferson X role. We do have Osborne in the same tier of waiver ad as DeMarcado and Jeff Wilson here, a tier below Roshan Johnston. Mark, what do you think about KJ Osborne and Vikings J-Jeff fallout?
I think Sam had a great note in the column this week that at wide receiver, we want to bet on talent more so than opportunity. And at running back, we're more than fine betting on opportunity and volume. Whereas wide receiver, it gets a little tougher to just bet on volume. So, I think Osborne's going to be out there pretty much 100% of the snaps, run all the routes. I think like people are going to be more excited on him than they should be. So I would take more of a cautious approach. I do think, initially seeing Sam's FAAB bid recommendation was like 10 to 15%. And I thought it could be a little higher, but I probably agree there. I don't see him really being anything more than, maybe a wide receiver 3 at best, but most likely like a wide receiver 4 flex play moving forward. I think Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson can easily combine for like 50% of the targets in Minnesota's offense. And then Osborne maybe gets 6, 7, 8 targets a week, which is decent, but since he's not that talented, it's not going to go that far, I don't think. So he's not really, I would probably prefer to add Josh Downs just as like, an exciting rookie potentially, but In general, I think I'm less excited on Osborne than I think like the public will be.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. This team throws at such a high rate and so much volume that like Osborne cannot be good and still get there some weeks. Like Mark said, it's not often you find guys off waivers who can actually get 6, 7, 8 targets right off the street. Not because KJ Osborne can earn them really, but because they throw so much, he's just going to fall into targets with that role. So yeah, I think I prefer Osborne to Downs, but I do think that Downs is better now that Anthony Richardson is out. Like I prefer Downs with Gardner Minshew than I did with Anthony Richardson. I think that's, interesting debate. I'd probably have Osborne. Sounds like Mark has Downs. One other guy on this front page I wanted to mention is Zach Charbonnet. We see this all the time. Rookies come out of their bye and have an expanded role. It's just hard for me to see it given how well Kenneth Walker has played. And so I don't expect them to come out of their bye and all of a sudden start featuring Zach Charbonnet. He still remains a guy just like JSN that I want to have on my bench in case there's an injury in front. Because if there's an injury in front for Charbonnet or JSN, I mean, they're going to have be a major asset. All right. Let's keep it moving to the best of the rest here. A couple guys that I wanted to bring up. First at tight end. We didn't have any tight ends in our top 10 pickups. However, I know there's people out there that are looking constantly for streamers and stuff like that. It was an awesome week for punt tight ends. Jonnu Smith went off. Kyle Pitts, yes, I consider a punt now. He went off. Dalton Schultz went off. You see him there on the list. Logan Thomas was the one that I wanted to highlight. I thought this dude's career might be over, man. So many concussions, so many injuries, so many problems. I believe he's over 30 years old now, and he's playing as well as I've seen him play, and the role has been really good too. So if you need a streamer at tight end, I'm pretty interested in Logan Thomas. What do you think about that one, Mark, and anyone else you want to highlight here on this page?
Yeah, Thomas is good for sure. Has a good matchup against Atlanta, who's allowed a lot of tight end points early on, and it's been frustrating as if you have Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson because you see so many targets going to Logan Thomas and the tight ends and running backs in Washington. It's been kind of tough for the wide receivers. So I do like Logan Thomas at tight end. I mean, I think there's a lot of names obviously between like tight end 10 and 20 that you could potentially stream. We've seen the volume for Jonnu Smith continue. Gerald Everett, I'm not super excited about, but they're coming off the bye. Same with Cade Otton. I think Cade Otton is interesting, deeper name because Mike Evans has a chance to miss coming off a hamstring injury, and Cade Otton ran over 90% of the routes in week 4, which is an elite mark for tight end. So those are two like deepish names I'd toss out.
You mentioned Gerald Everett there. A couple of things going for Gerald Everett right now. Donald Parham hurt his wrist before the bye. I'm not sure if he's going to be back for this game or not. And second, obviously, Mike Williams is out for the year. He was going to command more targets than Quinton Johnston was going to command. So, I think you can make a case for Gerald Everett here. I would probably want Parham out if I was going to stream in Everett there. Let's go to, I did want to mention Matthew Stafford's setup. I think you can stream in Matthew Stafford in good matchups and get results now that Cooper Kupp is back. I mean, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, Tyler Higbee, Kieran Williams, like Matthew Stafford's going to be productive with that setup. And so we do have him as our top quarterback add for this week among guys who are actually available, a little bit ahead of Sam Howell here. And I like that.
Yeah, I have a lot of leagues where I have Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, guys that I need to, kind of fill in. And Stafford I've added in a couple already, and he would clearly be the top one for me.
All right, for any deep league sickos out there, absolute stone cold sickos, just want to highlight a couple names here. Trey Palmer, Bucks wide receiver. We're not sure on Mike Evans' status right now. Hurt his hamstring before the bye. Trey Palmer showed flashes for sure. Got a lot of buzz during camp and earned that wide receiver 3 role. If Mike Evans is out, you could probably do worse than Trey Palmer. Already mentioned Deontay Foreman for the deep leaguers. I think that's a really, really, really interesting one. And then the last one I wanted to mention, Chase Claypool was traded to the Dolphins. Now, I don't expect much to come of this. However, Mike McDaniel is going to get the most out of his talent. If Chase Claypool's head in the game, I think right now he should be the number 3 wide receiver or work towards that. I mean, Chosen Anderson, Braxton Berrios, guys like this, it's nonsense, right? So if you're in a really deep league, maybe you can add Chase Claypool and see if he can be a piece of this Miami explosive offense. I doubt it happens. It's unlikely, but yeah, it's at least possible. Mark, any thoughts on those guys or any other super deep league stuff to mention?
Not a whole lot, just that the Bucks guys I do think are interesting with Mike Evans' uncertainty around his hamstring. So that would include Trey Palmer, Cade Otton, and then at the RB2 position, we've been treating Sean Tucker as an interesting stash. And in week 4, he didn't play at all, and Keyshawn Vaughn took his role. So not something I'm monitoring a little bit. Like I think Sean Tucker is a drop, and Keyshawn Vaughn could be interesting add in these super deep leagues, but nothing else really.
All right, let's get to a few questions here before we wrap. S-Rob says, should I drop Quinton Johnston and pick up KJ Osborne? When do we just cut our losses with Johnston overall? So as the Chargers come out of their bye, I want to have Quinton Johnston. Like, I just want to have him on my team. I understand that it's tempting to go KJ Osborne or Quinton Johnston. I'd rather have Johnston. Note that Johnston ran a route on 71% of the dropbacks in the game before the bye. That's like his floor, I think, going forward. Tough matchup this week against Dallas. It's probably not going to be great, but I still think Quinton Johnston just has so much more upside than KJ Osborne. Would you agree there, Mark? QJ over KJ?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Mets Pastrami says, I literally have nobody viable other than Christian McCaffrey at running back. Perfect. This is the way.
Yeah.
This is the way that it should be. Mets Pastrami. You wanted to have Cam Akers or Miles Sanders or some other freaking dust ball there. No, you didn't want that anyways. So now he says, how much FAAB do I drop on DeMarado? I have Roshan too, so maybe he can fill in. Mets Pastrami. This is the stuff that dreams are made of, man. You take one running back early, Christian McCaffrey, and figure the rest out super late. Now, hopefully, you got Dave Montgomery or James Cook or Brian Robinson as your RB2. But if you didn't, we can still make it work here. I don't mind going hard on DeMarado. Sounds like I'm a little bit higher on DeMarado than Mark is. But if you're desperate at running back, I don't mind going pretty hard at him. And yeah, you'll be able to start Roshan, assuming that he gets cleared also.
I was about to say, I would have Roshan over DeMarado. And man, if I was starting CMC and Roshan in the backfield, I feel pretty pumped right now based on how things are going at running back. So I think he's in a decent spot in terms of FAAB. I'd say, I don't know, 15% on DeMarado, 10 to 15%, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Sean says, my league loves to overspend their FAAB budget. Many have already blown their wad. Somebody spent $102 for now hurt Achane. I got to say, Sean, you couldn't predict the Achane injury, man. 102, that would have been high for me on Achane, maybe, but would have been good if he didn't get hurt. Anyways, he says, what's a good price for KJ Osborne? Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of questions that are hard to answer because it's hard for us to know exactly what you need, how bad you need KJ Osborne. Just because other people don't have a lot of money left doesn't mean you have to go out and try to get everyone. I would be really conservative probably on Osborne, considering that nobody else can really go high. So if you want him, 10% maybe of your budget might be fine, $15 or something like that. Yeah. Lloyd Rage says, is 100% too much for Wilson? I assume he's referring to Jeff Wilson here. So the concern for me on Jeff Wilson is, what if they think he's the same role as Raheem Mostert and he's just his backup? I don't think that's the case. I think there'll be 1A and 1B, but it's at least worth noting that possibility. I don't know, Mark. 100% on Jeff Wilson sounds kind of aggressive to me.
Yeah, that seems way too aggressive for me. I think he might be the third, fourth best ad this week alone. So definitely wouldn't go 100%. If you're really desperate, I do think being somewhat aggressive is okay, but maybe like, I don't know, 40 to 50% at the most. Again, they play Carolina this week. So if you're going to start him right away, potentially, but 100% way too much.
I will say that Mike McDaniel knows Jeff Wilson for a long time. Like, they were in San Francisco, like they're all from like the Kyle Shanahan tree. I think they really like Jeff Wilson. I really do. We'll see how healthy he can be and what kind of role he can carve out. But yeah, I do think that they're going to use him quickly. Nicholas says, apart from Christian Watson, would you feel comfortable dropping guys like Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs for higher upside plays? That's an interesting question. We do have guys on the drop list here in the article. For those of you guys interested in that, we don't have Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs on there this week. Obviously, really bad Jordan Love game last night against Las Vegas. Mark, what do you think about dropping Reed or Romeo for someone with more upside?
Yeah, I'd be fine dropping Reed. I actually have made that move in a couple leagues myself because I have a lot of Jaden Reed, and he had a decent first few weeks, but obviously with Christian Watson coming back, that really cuts into his target share. Aaron Jones hasn't even been back yet. We'll see. I do like Reed, but like maybe as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, he pretty much has strictly played the slot, so I'm not really sure what his upside can be for us. So I would cut him over Dobbs, and just with this Green Bay offense, they've also been playing really slow as well, still under Matt LaFleur. So I think a little less upside, looking at it now than I thought maybe coming into the season on Reed.
Zmart says, if Jaleel McLaughlin, the McLaughlin group, is still available, how would you compare him to Roshan Johnson if I need a running back? I think that's an interesting question. Jaleel McLaughlin, I think, looked awesome and has looked awesome like every time he's touched the ball. The problem is I do think Javonte Williams will be back this week. That said, man, I think McLaughlin could get like first quarter carries, even with Javonte healthy and P. Ryan in the mix. We're going to go to a 3-man running back committee on a team that is really, really bad in the Broncos. Now, they're going to get in a lot of shootouts this year, so maybe there's something there. But I'm worried about 3-man committee. What would you think? You'd rather have McLaughlin right now or Roshan?
I'd rather have Roshan. You mentioned it. Just 3 running back committees are really tough to diagnose in fantasy, and for us to really get any value out of them. It really sounds like Javonte, was 50-50 to play this past week, so expect him to be back Thursday. So, I mean, Jaleel would be nothing more than a bench stash, and I think Roshan, hopefully he clears week 6, but even if not, you're going to get 2 to 3 weeks startability out of him, where Jaleel, it's kind of just stash and hope, maybe Javonte or P. Ryan went down. So it would be Roshan pretty easily for me there.
Okay. Last one we're going to do here is from Jay Swinner. He says, is Justice Hill a better stash than Kendry Miller or Jeff Wilson? Yeah, the Justice Hill stuff is hard for me because Lamar's not going to throw the running backs a lot. And at the goal line, Lamar's going to run, and Gus Edwards is probably a better goal line option also than Justice Hill. So that's a hard one for me. I think I'd rather have Jeff Wilson, then Kendry, then Justice Hill. But I think you can make a real good case for Justice Hill over Kendry if you wanted to, especially with Jamal Williams maybe back soon. What do you think about Justice Hill versus Kendry and Jeff Wilson?
Yeah, I actually like Justice Hill a decent amount. I think a bit more than it sounds like you do, just because, I mean, he came back, and so in week 4, he didn't play that much, battling toe and hamstring injury. He was on the injury report again this week, but played 55% of the snaps, where Gus Edwards was below 50%. So he's going to be almost 50-50. You mentioned, Gus Edwards, the favorite for goal line carries, but Justice Hill did score a touchdown from, I think, like 12, 15 yards out this week, and is catching passes. So I think Justice Hill is like, a decent starter, RB2 flex starter in PPR leagues just at the moment with the state of the RB position. Whereas I think Kendry is, purely a bench stash right now with the role Kamara is getting. And then Jeff Wilson, I'd probably have Jeff Wilson maybe a little bit above Justice Hill just for some more potential upside. But I don't know. I think like in the short term, Justice Hill is my favorite of the 3 here.
Interesting. Yeah. I would have Jeff Wilson pretty clearly ahead there. Just I want access to Miami offense, and I think that Jeff Wilson at least gives me some of that. But yeah. All right. That is going to do it for this week's Waiver Wire show. Shout out to Sam, who continues to crush in the column. If you want more context and detail and FAAB recommendations on all these guys, if you have DraftKit Pro or the in-season package, you'll be able to access Sam's article that is on the site right now. Many thanks to Mark for coming in and crushing it once again. Sam will be back next week with me for this show. For Mark, for Sam, for producer Patrick, for producer Steven, everyone behind the scenes, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.